Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabley, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. Welcome back to Matter of Facts podcast. Phil and Andrew are back behind the mic. I'm going to do my absolute best not to cough and gag and sneeze through this entire show because my allergies have gone ballistic. It is officially summer in southeast Louisiana. And I kind of feel like I was snorting pollen off an oak tree's butt last night. It's bad. It's a really bad. Like this, I'm having one of those like 2 or 3 or 4 time a year moments where I wake up and I feel like somebody just beat my face in with an oak branch. But it'd be all right. It hasn't killed me yet. And, 40 years I've managed to survive allergy attacks. So we'll power through.
I was going to say, what's that mean? Did you die? But did you die?
No, I haven't died yet. And, I keep hearing if it doesn't, whatever kills you doesn't make you stronger. But I'm pretty sure it also makes you unconscious at a certain point. So, So before we get to topic, Andrew, I hold you responsible for what's sitting back there over my left shoulder today because my checking account is currently crying in the corner and threatening to press charges against me.
I mean, that's your fault.
You helped a little tiny bit, though.
Yeah, I helped a little bit, but I mean, not entirely my fault. I mean, I would blame Tommy, if anything, because he's the one that was like, here, Gillian, try this out. And then she was like, Phil, we need this. And you were like, I remember the conversation was like, but those are really expensive. I don't care. We need it.
I'm so glad I had like a whole campsite full of witnesses. So what Andrew's referred to is up at the, get a can of pepper spray, spritz it in the air, walk through it, breathing deeply. I am absolutely not going to do that because I've been pepper sprayed before. That's not a fun experience. Matter of fact, I've also inhaled CS tear gas, which is worse than any pepper spray I've ever encountered. And I've been saber-retted before. That's awful. But I would like mainline saber-red before I would ever inhale CS again. CS hurts. But anyway, so at the Arkansas camping trip, one of the great enablers, and that's what I'm referring to all of my friends as from here on out because we all provoke each other to make horrible financial decisions. One of the great enablers walked up to my wife, handed her a PVS 14, and sent her off into the woods to go stargazing. And yes, like Andrew said, she shouted back at me, "We need one of these." And when I hollered back, "It's expensive," because I don't know if my wife at the moment understood how eye-wateringly, cripplingly expensive night vision can be, but I was well aware. And she said, "I don't care. We need it." And I was like, okay. And then before the end of the weekend, this sorry sod just happened to mention that he was thinking about selling his because he was thinking about upgrading. And my head cranes around and I'm like, I know somebody who might be interested if you're, one to unload it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know some people have, their thoughts on night vision, stuff like that. But I don't know. It's one of those things. It's, to me, it's the great equalizer, especially if you can control the night, you can control a lot. I mean, if you are, as long as you're not under a rock, you notice half of our life is at night. Depending on where you're at, more or less. But, yeah, I mean, night vision is, and we've talked to quite a few of patrons and stuff like that, and they're kind of on the same page. That's the thing is like Trek. I mean, he's a big proponent of it as well. And the thing is it might not seem feasible now, but the idea that you can control the night and actively be searching, or if something happens, we're not. Civil unrest has been happening a lot more recently. So if you can keep watch and you can turn out the lights in your house and make it look like, especially if they're targeting homes with people in there, you can definitely, if you can safeguard your house and keep that and basically control the night. I think that to me it's better. It's just you have that advantage, and I think civilians should definitely own night vision. I think civilians should own suppressors, fully auto machine guns. I think civilians should have body armor, like fully kitted up, ready to go.
If our president left it in
man.
Afghanistan for the Taliban to play with, civilians should have it.
Right.
Like, can we just use that as a blanket statement?
Right. And I think if you look at like the whole Minuteman thing, back in the day there, you had to be ready at a moment's notice to respond to something. And I think as in today's society, technology has just improved, and night vision and body armor and just all kinds of stuff, like all that stuff should be included in your preps and included in the Minuteman standard of, hey, I need to grab it and go. You might not need it, but it does get dark everywhere. So
and let me quote two people, one of which I'm going to probably butcher a little bit because it's been a while since this has been said to me, but these two gentlemen, both Army, one's a good friend of ours, one is a friend of mine that you haven't met, both Army, one infantry, one former Ranger. The Ranger told me, because we were talking about like night vision and how eye-wateringly, cripplingly expensive it is, and he's not a man of unlimited means, but he has money. And he told me, he said, night vision is the one thing I would whip out a credit card at 20% interest and go into debt for. Because it is the greatest force multiplier available to civilians. And that's straight out of the mouth of a guy who spent a lot of his time on patrol under Nods. And then my friend, who's Army infantry, told me, he said, because, he was in a theater of operations where, like, his guys had night vision and the insurgency did not. And he told me, he said, not to sound blasphemous, but this is him. He said, when you are the only person in your AO with night vision, you are basically an angry god. And that was his perspective, because he's like, they can't see in the dark. They're like, you are watching them pick their nose and pull their pants out of their butt while you are shooting at them, and they can't figure out where you are. They're just firing wildly into the air. And he said, if they get around within 50 feet of one of us, it's by just dumb luck. Mm-hmm. Spray and pray. And he's like, that was what he told me. He said, being the only person in your area of operations with night vision is like being an angry god. Like, they can't even see you, and you can just tear them apart at will. Yeah. So, like, it's been impressed upon me over the years that night vision was definitely an enormous advantage in a civil unrest situation. But it was always one of those, like, it's like I always tell everybody, I'm like, I have an infinitely long list of preps, and it will never come down to zero, because I'll always find things to put on the list, and I'll constantly be reprioritizing, and that reprioritizing's been happening a lot over the last several years. Like, as I look at what's going on in the world, I look at the state of my family and our preps, I'm constantly reevaluating what needs to go further up the list. And night vision's always been on there. Excuse me. It's just never been at the top of the list. And what really escalated it up to the top of the list was, I got a friend deal on a really, really nice unit. And by the way, I have to tell you, you undersold that thing, because that is the cleanest freaking intensifier tube I've ever seen in my life.
Well, then send me more money.
Choke yourself.
The thing is go ahead.
Well, on the one hand, I got a friend offer me a deal. It was a way for me to get into it at a slight discount, and it was a way for you to get your money back out of it so you could upgrade. And on the other hand, somebody convinced my wife to give me the green light, and I was like, I better hop on this grenade before it blows.
Yeah. I mean, to wrap it up, so we don't bash or basically talk the whole show away on it. I mean, I'm trying to get his name's John from U.S. Night Vision. Working on scheduling him on to talk about nods and stuff, and they are affordable. They are getting more affordable, of course, like the different generations. And if you're looking at getting into it, it's a lot easier today than it was 15 years ago. And that's the thing is, I can't remember who it was, but someone told me when I was talking before I even got that unit, basically they were like, well, how many guns do you have? And I don't know. I told them a number, a rough estimate. And they're like, well, like how much did that gun cost? How much did one of your guns cost? And basically it's like, I went through the list of this one one cost this one cost this rifle cost this, whatever. And they're like, well, you could, you have a good rifle, a good shotgun, a good pistol. Why do you need another $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 in guns and stuff? And that's the thing is, you have people that they prioritize and they are throwing out that they're constantly buying guns, always buying a new gun every month or every couple months or whatever like that. Well, take that money, start putting it aside, and you'll have the money to put down on a good unit, a PVS 14 or even duals, in a very short time. And that, I mean, in order to buy what I did, to buy like that 14 and stuff, like that's basically what I did. I was putting money aside, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's an investment. It's an expensive investment, but at the same time, if the day ever comes where I'm like, I need cash, I know right now, like I'd hate to sell some stuff, but I know I can get cash fast and a good amount of cash by selling something like that. But yeah, I mean and you talk to different people and they have their different opinions and stuff like that. And that's the thing is, I'm kind of curious. I wouldn't mind seeing the different levels, like the really cheap night vision or up to some, to what like you have and stuff. It'd be fun to just to play around and see, because the gain and like the lighting and how much lighting, what does it do? And it'd be interesting to see. So I'm looking forward to getting John on and talking more about it, and even experimenting with the units and just trying to figure out what we can do, what's better and what works. And but the thing is though, is if something is cheap and it works, then I guess use it. That's the thing. But yeah, it's fun. At the end of the day, it's fun to throw something on and walk around at night. So
scare the hell out of your neighbors.
Right.
Look like SEAL Team 6 is walking up and down the street.
A fat version of it, in my opinion.
Meal Team 6.
Meal Team 6. Yeah. I'm not referring to you. I'm referring to me, just so you know.
Oh no, you and I are about the same size, so I'll wear that one evenly. But yeah, I thought we would talk about how the frickin' the ebb and flow of gun control is how I titled this. And very simply, like, as we are wont to do every now and then, because this crap never friggin' stops, I think it's important to look back at where this national conversation is about gun rights and gun control, and where it's ebbing and flowing. It's going back and forth. Like, it's never. I don't feel like the other side gets this crippling win where they've just totally broken our legs. And I don't feel like we ever get this crippling win where we finally kick their, sweep the leg and knock them on their butt. I feel like it's just constantly this back and forth, this tit for tat. And sometimes I get very conspiratorial. I think that's by design, because certain political operatives need the wedge issue to keep the people fighting amongst themselves.
Yeah.
But that being said, so let's start off with this. And I'm going to be jumping back and forth between another screen so that I can read off some of this nonsense. But Senator Tim Kaine and his Democrat colleagues have introduced legislation to ban suppressors at the national level. And they're calling it the HERE Act, Help Empower Americans to Respond. Their assertion, Andrew, try not to giggle too loudly, is that being able to see the flash and hear the report of a firearm is a very important tool for law enforcement to combat gun crimes. And since suppressors make all that go away completely, because, it's like Looney Tunes around here, and physics don't exist in the land of gun control, that we need to ban them, even though they've been heavily regulated for 100 years. And even though everybody that legally owns a suppressor today, has had to go through a background check and pay a $200 tax stamp, on top of the fact that they're not cripplingly expensive like night vision expensive, but suppressors are not cheap. Even cheap ones are not cheap. And on top of the fact that I can't really think of a time in the last, I don't know, at least 40 years since I've been alive that suppressors have been used in a crime. But yes, by all means, ban them. Suppressors scary.
The only one that I can think of off the top of my head was wasn't the former cop in California that was on a rampage there for a hot second. I think he had a couple suppressors that he was using. I don't remember.
Oh, that's a really great example. An agent of the state committed a crime. So let's take the thing he used away from the people he was perpetrating the crime upon.
Right.
This is literally like dropping the fox into the hen house. The hens get eaten, and then the ones that survive get their beaks removed because they pecked at the freaking fox.
Yeah, no, I came across an article from the Washington Free Beacon. Almost a bacon, because that's on my mind right now. But the Washington Free Beacon, and this was from 2017, but it says ATF, basically it's a quote from the ATF, 1.3 million silencers, which is way higher nowadays, in U.S., rarely used in crimes. And that's coming from the ATF, which I'm sure they'll change their mind on it. But that's the thing, is the idea that they want to ban suppressors because they quote, it is well past time that we pass the HERE Act, legislation that would prevent armed assailants from using deadly devices that only make incidents of gun violence all the more dangerous.
You know what else makes gun violence all the more dangerous? People that don't know what gender they are, but we're not banning those.
Oh, we'll get into that topic.
Phil's in a spicy mood this morning, so just be forewarned.
Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy.
No, it's just,
and we have, it's basically, it's all Democrats that are signed on to it, and and especially the gremlin, Dianne Feinstein, which I can't believe she's still breathing air.
Senator Palpatine, you mean?
Yeah, Senator Palpatine. But it's just interesting because this falls in line with every single anti-gun bill that attempts to get passed. Is they make up some wild accusations and some wild theories and wild one-liners that are quotes that basically get passed around the mainstream media, but it gets eaten up. It gets eaten up by the general public, because the average person that they don't own guns, they don't really want to own guns, they don't know anything about firearms, and they eat it up and they believe it because they don't know any better. And that's why it's like I love pointing to either taking them out shooting and show them, be like, no, you still gotta, you probably should still wear some hearing protection if you're shooting still indoors with it, and or you're shooting a lot. Because I mean, I have a couple different cans, and it's nice to go hunting with. I love hunting with my 6.5 Creedmoor with my can on it, because I don't have ringing in my ear after I shoot, after I down a deer. But at the same time, my dad, when I shoot, he can still hear that crack across the field.
It's not Hollywood quiet, is what you're saying.
Right. They rarely are. They're hardly ever Hollywood quiet. There's only a few times where, like, I've seen a couple suppressors, or I've shot where you have the right ammo, you have like the right suppressor, you have the right barrel length, you have everything specifically detailed, and somebody took the time to actually, okay, I'm building this for suppressing. I'm gonna science it, and it's gonna have, like, okay, this length of the beard to have the proper powder burn, this length for the suppressor, all this other crap. And yes, it's stupid quiet. It's so quiet it makes you laugh. That's how quiet it is. But how
Yes.
much research and science and all kinds of crap that went into them getting it that quiet, the
Well,
average criminal and all that stuff will there it's not quiet. Like it's not that quiet. Like I can't under it's just funny to me. And that's why like I mean and I'm not a big fan of some of these, these gun tubers and stuff like that. Just because like I feel like they're just clicks and they're trying to get rich and all that stuff, which I guess more power to them. But a lot of them they've been making it a point to shooting like on their videos, shooting suppress, like trying to debunk a lot of these claims about suppressors that they're Hollywood quiet, that you can't hear anything. And no, and that's the thing is people don't understand that, and they need to do some of this research and figure out that these politicians are full of crap, which they won't, but that's besides the point, I guess.
yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, like in moments like this where the government is trying to ban something, I mean, no, I don't even want to go down the road of they don't have the authority to because of the Second Amendment. I've said that before. I don't
But
really want to go down the road of they don't have the authority to because it's the government. The government is, of the people, by the people, and if the people don't consent, then they don't have the right to. I'm going down anarchist territory. Let me just simply say that, like, in order for me to acquiesce, is a good way to put it, to a government administered ban on anything, I first have to be convinced of two things. I have to be convinced that that the state had the authority to do this, which I don't. Now we can agree or disagree over that. I mean, admittedly, I'm like teetering between a libertarian and an anarchist, depending on my mood, and it's kind of sour this morning as a result of the allergy attack. So, give me that, just to work with me on that. But the other thing that somebody has to do is they have to convince me that it will actually accomplish what it is stated to accomplish. And if the goal is to reduce crime, then go refund the police or refund the DA's office and start slamming people in jail left and right for committing crimes. But passing a law to prevent something that happens exceedingly rarely, if ever, is a waste of my time and a waste of my money, because my money funds these idiots' lifestyle while they waste their time, which is also my time, because my labor is paying for their time. And that's aggravating. But it's also aggravating because, like, we gun owners have already freaking chafed under a 90-year-long prohibition on just being able to walk out into your garage and make something most of us know how to make from a used oil filter. Like, suppressors are not that freaking difficult to manufacture. And if somebody just said, I don't give a damn about the law or about, any of this nonsense, they could make one themselves out of stuff from Ace Hardware. It's not rocket surgery. And in spite of that, in spite of the fact that you've had to get an FBI background check, in spite of the fact that you've had to pay bribery money to the frickin' government, in spite of all that, a lot of people have taken the dive and gone and gotten suppressors because they are useful to reduce the report of a firearm. They are useful to maintain your hearing. They have uses to civilians, the same as night vision and body armor and other things. And because we have exercised our right, because we have tolerated that law and paid the bribery money, now that they're becoming more common, now politicians are like, oh, no, they're having too much fun. We have to tamp that back down. And I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in playing that game. So a ban on suppressors is a great big old fat no. And just to prove that I don't just pick on Democrats, because I think they're all scumbags, the governor of Tennessee signs constitutional carry and then immediately turns around and endorses red flag laws.
Yeah,
And that's Bill Lee. That's a Republican. I think these two things happened. It was within 30 days. Like, it was pretty close together. Tennessee became a constitutional carry state, and then the governor starts chirping about we need a special legislative session for red flag laws. And Like, Andrew, I need a designated place on my wall with a little red square around it that says "Beat forehead until the pain stops."
Yeah, the thing is the talk came about when basically he after the whole Nashville shooting, um, and that's what he. So basically, after the whole Nashville thing, that's when he was like, "We need red flag laws," blah 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 blah. And I'm pretty sure he's getting opposed by it. But yeah, but that's the thing though is red flag laws would not have done anything because correct me if I'm wrong, but these guns were not stolen. They were not obtained illegally. The person passed the background check. The parents had no idea what was going on. But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is what law would have stopped this? Well, for one, enforce some of these laws that are already on the book if you want to go that far. Um, so yeah. I mean, because obviously they were hell bent on murder, and that's illegal already. So that didn't stop them. The signs that said gun free zone and all that stuff that never stopped them. So again, I put the blood of the children and stuff like that. I put that all that lands on the anti-gun, anti-right people because again, if parents were allowed to carry, or if the teachers and stuff, if they were allowed to carry, if they were allowed to have a firearm, if they had resource officers in the school, armed guards, if they had metal detectors, the list goes on and on if they had this, but it still stands that gun laws do nothing but harm the people. That's all they're intended for. Is they want to disarm the population, and it harms the average. It harms the law-abiding citizen. That's all it does, and that's all the red flag laws do. So I'm hoping this guy gets his butt handed to him, and possibly even for promoting this. I'm hoping he loses his, governorship and gets kicked out. I don't know what term he's in, or what, but
Regardless, I hope he's in his last term,
yeah,
whether that's by choice or not. But two things going down that road. Like first and foremost, his comments make me roll my eyes because he said that the goal of the session will be to strengthen public safety and preserve constitutional rights. And like I have a friend who I swear to God, I've been saying it for almost 7 years. I need to get him on the show because he'd be a fun third seat because like he's definitely like he's a lifelong Democrat. He's definitely left of center on a lot of different issues. He and I don't agree on a lot of things, but he is like vociferously pro-gun. And he's gotten infinitely more pro-gun over the last several years of he and I getting to know each other. So like he started off kind of like breaking from most of his friends and his social and political allies on the issue of gun rights, and then as he and I've gotten to know each other better and we've talked more, he's shifted like full blown over to the other side of like, I'm cool with everything y'all are about, but this whole thing about limiting gun rights is stupid, guys. Like we need to knock this off. But he's one of those people that for a lot of years, whenever he would hear about red flag laws, he's like, when you listen to the argument, it sounds like a good idea, but something tells me I'm not hearing the whole story. And I would explain to him about like people that have literally gotten shot by cops because they got red flagged. Like, and about how red flag laws actually work, and about how the presumption of innocence before guilt is totally short circuited because you are assumed to be a threat and your gun's taken, and you have to go prove that they're not. Mm-hmm. And the minute I told him all that, he was like, "Yeah, that's bullcrap." And I was like, "Well, that's the part you're not hearing." So whenever somebody says red flag laws are for public safety, what they really mean is we want the police and the courts and the state, because the police and the courts are all agents of the state. And I don't trust the government at any level, no matter who's in charge, ever for the rest of my life. And that's a healthy position to take, in my opinion, because if you trust them, you stop paying attention to what they're doing. Anyway, so you're allowing all those people to circumvent the stated process by which to take your rights from you at gunpoint and shoot you if you disagree. Now, I kind of like having all those layers and all those hoops, those flaming hoops for them to jump through because it makes their lives harder and job harder. And I mean, yes, they have to pencil whip some things and go through the motions. If the state's against you, the state's going to do what the state's going to do, but at least it makes their job a little harder. And red flag laws let them come in with the big old scissors and cut all the red tape, and they just get to go knock on your front door and take your shit from you. And if you don't like it, they shoot you in the face because it's literally happened. If that sounds incendiary, I don't know what to tell you. It is incendiary, but that's the way it is. So yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I kind of hope this guy gets booted out of office because anybody that's proposing red flag laws doesn't deserve to have another day spent in a seat of power. So, let's talk about Illinois. We have friends in Illinois. As a matter of fact, we have a friend who, when the Illinois assault weapons ban got passed, I think he told me that he would be put in prison for 145 years if this goes through. For things that, by the way, were perfectly legal the day before. So, like, if that doesn't nauseate and turn your stomach and make you just want to scream at the sky, I don't know what to tell you. But when the government can come in and retroactively make you, like, hand you 2 life sentences, I just don't think that's okay, personally. But the back and forth on this has been that Illinois passed an assault weapons ban. It's Illinois. Surprise, surprise. The interesting part is that this was actually enjoined by a lower court, and then the injunction was enjoined by an appeals court. So this has gone from the realm of if you own an AR-15, you're a felon, to okay, this is not legal, and no crap, it's not legal. And then the other court saying, yeah, but let's make it illegal while we figure it out. And now National Association for Gun Rights has taken this to the Supreme Court, and they've already petitioned Chief Justice Amy Coney Barrett to at least stay the current appeals court injunction against the original stay. That way, this cannot be prosecuted by the state of Illinois and its agents while this gets figured out.
And the thing is she actually, what's nice is, I mean, there is hope. I'm not going to hold my breath at all, but there is some hope on it because she did ask the state she did ask basically saying, hey, like, I want to be briefed on it. And they, I believe the state, I think it was, they had until May 8th to respond. And so I think it was the state. Yeah. Yeah, she asked an emergency request for an injunction against the ordinance on Monday. This article basically says that means the one justice wants to hear about the case before the high court decides whether or not to weigh in. The city has until May 8th to answer claims that the ban violates the Constitution. And so, obviously, it's past May 8th. I don't know exactly what they said. But, I mean, that's a good sign that she was asked the city to respond. Again, I'm not going to hold my breath until the court actually says something. And then on top of that, I'm not going to hold my breath anyway because we'll see what happens. But I don't know. It's good to see that there's a justice that is at least wants to hear a brief on it. But yeah, because honestly, if these are allowed to stand in one state, you're going to start. I mean, Michigan. There's already rumors that Michigan is poised to push one through as well with our current legislation. So I think, and usually with cases like this, when the Supreme Court is looking to take up a case of a assault weapons ban and everything, usually you hear it's crickets for a little bit, and then if the Supreme Court whether just says I'm not going to hear it or rules in favor and says nah, it's not unconstitutional, stuff like that. Usually the day after that, that's when other states that were waiting that's when they drop all of their anti-gun laws that they can. Just to, it's a crazy effect. And I guarantee you, when we see what happens with this one, I can guarantee you I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan didn't drop one like the following hour after this was put out. So we'll see. But again, the courts and all that stuff, they can say what they want. The people need to not comply. They need to resist. They need to not comply, start fighting back legally. And I don't know the way it's going to go. But
see, the frustrating part of this to me is that, like, okay, I'm going to be Phil for the next 5 minutes. Like, admittedly, I'm a bit of a malcontent in the Second Amendment community. I am extremely critical of people and organizations other people seem to be absolutely like have a crush on. I think we're in this situation because of two Supreme Court justices who I think were probably the closest we had to correct on the Second Amendment, but still fumbled in the end zone. And it's Clarence Thomas and the late Chief Justice Scalia. And most people in the Second Amendment community are absolutely in love with these two because of the Bruen and the Heller decisions and how it strengthened gun rights and it gave us our rights back and all this nonsense. And I just want to throttle every one of those people literally to death. Because what the two of them both did was fall short of explaining to these freaking morons what the Second Amendment is. The Second Amendment plainly says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, in the Heller decision, Heller, if you really read it, left open the door to gun control. He never came out and said the Second Amendment says what it says. You can't infringe upon the right, period. What he said was people have a right to own firearms in their home. And so he left the door open. And then you look at the Bruen decision. The Bruen decision specifically does leave the door open to things like licensing, training requirements, and prohibitive places for as far as carry. All these Supreme Court, even when we quote unquote win one in Supreme Court, we don't win. What we do is we get lip service of the Second Amendment. We get told, okay, you can have some of your rights back, but they won't just take the firm stance and say, this is what the Second Amendment says. These are the words. These words have meaning. And shall not be infringed means all these gun laws are dead. Get rid of them. Even the Bruen decision, where he points to history and tradition being the way by which we rule upon Second Amendment laws. If that were true, then at that moment, every single lawsuit against every single gun law that was in the courts at that moment would have shredded every last one of them at that moment. Because in 1792, there were none of these gun laws and there was no justification for any of them. And the Second Amendment rules supreme. But again, what we have here is we have a court system that is playing controlled opposition, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't want to allege that because I think I want to believe in the system that we are all subject to, but I'm losing my faith as we go because I'm watching what's going on and I'm reading these opinions. And even when you look at it and by all rights and logic, you think we have an ironclad kick the anti-gunners in the teeth case. We've got them up against the wall this time. The courts let us down. And I'm beginning to think that's by design. I don't think the courts want to win this fight, and I really don't think the Supreme Court wants to hand us that victory, because deep down in the pits of their heart, I think they're terrified of a world with no gun laws. I think that everybody alive today is terrified of the world that our founding fathers grew up in, because it was as close to anarchy as this country has ever seen, but it was where freedom was maximized. So, like, chew on that, audience, for just a minute. If the idea of, quote-unquote, the wrong people being able to have guns and have suppressors and have body armor and no gun laws, no prohibition on where you can carry a gun, if all that makes you a little nervous, then I think you need to do some soul-searching, because, like, that is the world that our founding fathers created that we have just aborted over the last 250 years. And I'd love to see us get back to it.
My
But I don't
problem
think
is
this. I don't think we're going to get there with Supreme Court
no.
because even when we get a favorable decision, it's not the favorable decision that the Constitution demands.
Well, it's yeah, it's the you can have your rights, but and that's the same people. That's the exact same type of people that are. Well, I support the Second Amendment, but like those are the people that they do more damage to the Second Amendment and the cause than anything. There is no but. It's you either support it or you don't, and you support it in its entirety or you don't support it at all. Their background checks are terrible things. Like no background checks don't stop crime. Obviously, we see that all the time. We see that all it is, and it's been proven time and time again that all it is a backdoor gun registration. I've been saying that for years, but of course, no background checks are needed. Background checks are needed. The founding fathers, I mean, the way they intended it was they they believe that in the writings that I read and all that stuff, it's they believe that the people need to have the same basically everything the government has, the people should have it as well. And the fact that and if you support gun control and you support gun control for the people and not for the government, you need to flick yourself in the eye. Because if you look back in history, time and time again, governments who have taken firearms and disarmed the people have completely rolled over them, stripped their rights away completely, and lined them up against the wall and shot them all. Like they massacred. And just look in history, you'll find many examples.
Nazis, Soviets,
Right.
Cuban communists, Cambodia,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the only
Chinese
name a
Communist
couple.
Party.
Yeah.
I mean,
But that's
at least the Chinese are a little inventive. I mean, they didn't just shoot people, line people against a wall. They ran people over with tanks. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
going to murder your population after you disarm them, at least be creative about it.
Well, and that's the thing is they're like, well, they can't fire back anyway, so let's just run them down. But I mean, look what was going on. I believe it was Venezuela, like what last year, 2 years ago, I think it was. They basically were like, people are rioting and like they were running people over with the armored vehicles and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, open up, throw a Molotov cocktail, freaking burn those people alive. Like, total anarchy. Just it's got to go. But that's the thing is, if you support gun control, but you do not support gun control for the government, again, flick yourself in your other eye, because you are the problem. And that's the thing is with these gun laws that they are proposing, they're not proposing them for government. They're in
they're
every
specifically in like legislating exceptions to law enforcement in these bills.
Yes. So why? It's because they want a disarmed populace and they want the government to have the power. Again, that has never turned out right for the people ever in history.
I just want to skim over this bullet point before we get to the last one because it dovetails into what you just said very cleanly. Washington has banned semi-autos. I know they're calling them assault weapons, but they're not. Washington wants to ban semi-automatic firearms. Everybody wants to ban fully semi-automatic firearms. These fucking idiots can't even get their wording right. But like, seriously, if you're trying to ban guns, I'm just not even entertaining your nonsense anymore because you're either uninformed or you're dishonest or in my opinion, you're probably an idiot. This popped up on my radar fairly recently, and I would love to have Trek on to have a discussion about this, or at least get a quote from him. Because this popped up recently, and I think this goes along with what you were just saying a minute ago, because we were talking about how there's this effort to ban these things from the people, but not ban them from, you call them police, I call them agents of the state. But there are all these attempts via gun control legislation to increase the disparity in the use of force between the people and the state. We want the state to have the bigger, badder, cooler stuff than the people so that the state always has the edge. Because, I mean, our opponents are not completely stupid. They understand that when you only have a couple million agents of the state and you have 320 something million or 330 million people, like if everybody has the same stuff, it doesn't take a lot of people to really put law enforcement on the back foot, for example. I mean, people running around New York City with Molotov cocktails and bricks caused the entire New York State Police Department to just hide in the corner. So the idea that people can just own all the same stuff as the police terrifies them. So they're trying to increase the disparity in the force available. And then I see this pop up in Vermont, where they ban owning and running paramilitary training camps. Now, that might sound like a reasonable thing on the front of it because, why would a person need to own and run a paramilitary training camp in the United States? That seems odd. And if it's odd, it scares us and we have to ban it. But if you dig into the legislation just a little bit, you start to see something that's a combination of interesting and worrying. Because what they're really saying is that if you train the undesirable people, if you train people that do bad things, you are now personally liable. The Vermont law does not apply to legitimate law enforcement activity or lawful activity by Norwich University or any other educational institution where military science is taught. It also doesn't apply to self-defense instruction or practice without the intent of causing civil disorder, firearms instruction that is intended to teach safe handling and use of firearms, and any lawful sports or activities like hunting, target shooting, and firearms collection, because let me tell you, the Second Amendment was really meant to make sure that FUDs could own lots of guns and collect them and hunt. Anyway. So what this law is really targeting is if you run a training group, if you are a firearms trainer and you teach certain things that we don't want normal people to know because we want only law enforcement to know those things, like how to run around in night vision or how to shoot, move, and communicate, how to use tactics, how to do things that a modern Minuteman just might want to know how to do, and one of those people does bad things, then you're liable for it. You get to go to jail. You get to pay the fine. The person who did it, they're either going to be dead or in prison too, but it comes back to you. Now, I think this is a pretty thinly veiled attempt to cool firearms trainers from training civilians. Because you and I have had this conversation recently about the fact that after 20 years out of uniform, I really want to get off flat ranges and start going back to training facilities and knock the rust off of myself. I really want to dig back into firearms training in a big way, and it's time. But I'm having trouble finding places around here in Southeast Louisiana that teach anything more than the basics. I'm finding lots of carbine 101 classes, and I'm seeing lots of handgun 101 classes. I'm seeing lots of places that teach classes, but it's at a level I'm already at because I learned how to use, AR platform weapons when I was a teenager, because I learned how to shoot handguns 20 years ago. I'm just not at the basic level, and I'm having trouble finding any training above the basic level without having to drive 8 hours or 2 days to come up to where you are. But I see this as an attempt to cool that further, because all the places around me that teach the really high speed stuff, it's military and law enforcement only. And I think that's what this is aimed at. They want to make sure that the people teaching the special things aren't teaching it to anybody but the special people. And that frustrates me.
Yeah, and that's the thing is they, like you and I were talking about when this first dropped, their attempt to ban firearms has failed to a point. Their attempt to, and so they're trying to go after the next thing that people want, which is training. The idea that they've defined paramilitary training, their definition, they can classify any training as paramilitary training. Anything, any tactics, anything the same. Just, but I mean, and that's the thing though, is like this to me falls under the whole, just like the anti-gun crowd that pushes the weapons of war. When they want to scare the average person, they label firearms. Well, it's a weapon of war. It's a weapon of war. It's used in war. This and it. It's like, do you realize? And then they go through and they ban. They're like, well, that's not a weapon of war. Well, no, pretty much every single gun is a weapon of war. Every gun has been every style of gun has been used in war at some point or time or current. And so the idea that they're sitting there and they're trying to ban paramilitary training with a loose definition, it's like, okay, well, what's that go? And I talked to Trek about it too, and Trek's not concerned at all. Like the thing is though, is if the idea for the training, if they sit there and they want to try to ban this kind of training or what they define as the paramilitary training, then their whole argument of forcing people to get for CPLs, to me that argument goes right out the window, because they want to force you to, in order to carry a firearm, conceal carry a firearm, you have to, in Michigan, you have to go through an 8-hour class of training.
Mm-hmm.
And it's both legal and then range time to make sure that you're competent with your firearm. Like that right there, it throws that argument right out the window that they need to require some kind of CPL training in order to do this. Because if they decided to go after and redefine, they just say Trek, for example, if they want to go after him and say, well, you're paramilitary training this, and this, it's like it's by the state that you're requiring CPL training, and we're training people with their firearm with CPLs. So that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know.
Are you asserting that anti-gunners need to make sense?
No.
Okay, just check.
Because I knew that would blow your mind up, because it won't ever make sense. No, it's just one of those things where they
backwards out of this chair. You'd have seen my heels.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's the thing is it's ridiculous, and the idea that they threw this out there, it only really solidifies the idea that neither party is for you, whether you want to believe it or not. The only thing that matters is like their total power and domination of the populace at any means necessary. So it's time to choose a side, Republican, Democrat. It's not a side to choose, but it's coming to a point where the people need to start banding together. They need to start, and I've said this multiple times on the podcast, where our greatest, what's the word I want to use? Basically, the people fighting amongst each other is the worst thing that can happen right now. That's what the government wants.
Greatest detriment.
Yeah. I mean, and the government wants that. They like it when the people are divided, because now they can go through and pass crap like this in Virginia. They can pass red flag laws, try to pass stuff in Tennessee, Texas. They were trying to pass to raise the minimum age to 21 to buy firearms, and luckily that it kind of got booted out. But that this kind of crap, they try to pass it, and it's while the people are distracted because they're fighting amongst each other because of race wars, which to me it would be non-existent if the politicians were not involved. And so we need to get together, and we need to make the government fear the people again. It needs to be that way.
Yeah, and like not even in a threatening way. I don't think threatening is required. I think what is required is for, like, most of us, by the time we graduate from childhood into young adolescence, we understand that if the burner's on and there's a pan on the stove, you should be afraid of grabbing that pan barehanded because it's hot and it hurts. And you should be afraid of sticking, like, a fork in a light socket because that's really going to hurt. And please don't go try to prove me wrong. So, like, fear is a healthy thing. Fear is a foreboding to warn us off of consequences before we have to experience them, usually a second time. And I do believe that our government needs to be afraid of the people, because the government needs to regain their respect for the consequences of angering your populace. That's what happened that's what happened in 1776, 1775, 1774. The state pissed off its people. Its people said, "Buzz off." And what resulted out of that was a war that had to happen because the people said, "We don't consent to be ruled by you any longer." And, you can't project power over an infinite distance against lopsided odds. And our government needs to regain the same understanding, even though they are on our shores, even though they count millions among their ranks. There are far more people than there are agents of the state. And the people need to understand that we have always had the power, and they have always worked very diligently to make us believe we don't have the power, and that they alone have the power. And they have convinced themselves that they are always righteous and have the power to lord over us in any ways they see fit. But if you read things that our founding fathers wrote, if you read the Constitution, if you read the Federalist Papers, if you read all these things, you understand that that was never intended to be the case. We've always had the power. We've always been the ones to make the demands. It is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. They are our employees, not our masters. So I would say that for those of you who believe that, it is time to get... It's the same thing I've been saying for years. I'm not the hold hands with other people and sing Kumbaya type. I'm just the one that says everyone needs to get loud and get vocal and be an advocate. Because the times of us going or sitting on the sidelines and letting the NRA do our bidding or preach for us, that's dead. We're way past the time where we can afford to sit quietly in polite settings so we don't upset people. It's time to reach the point where anytime anybody says anything crossways about gun ownership, anytime somebody says anything in a positive light about gun control laws, anytime somebody steps over that line, you have got to politely but firmly correct them and tell them the facts and advocate one-on-one, one person at a time, change their mind. I'm not saying you will or you'll win every time, but we all have to try. And if every gun owner in this country did that, we would turn this conversation around overnight. But every time you sit quietly and think, I don't want to upset people, I don't want to be that person, you've given up. You've given up the fight.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the thing is, I just before we just start wrapping this up, it's interesting talking to people from either side or just people who have been seeing what's been going on over the last decade, and they complain about the two-party system. They complain about, well, we need more choices. They complain about, well, this person and this person and this person and this party and all this crap, and this is a good person, but they don't align with any party, so they're not going to win. Blah blah blah. The biggest thing, like keep going back to, is we need to come together, and if the people would actually come together and not be fighting, not be, hey, you have more money than me, all that crap, we could actually change things. But until we can do that, which we won't because we're stupid, nothing will change. The two-party system will continue to thrive. We will never have a person that is, libertarian. They claim to be libertarian or whatever, but like a true libertarian will never win because the people cannot get behind them and come together and understand that Democrat and Republicans don't care about you, and we need something different. It's going to be the same thing over and over again until the cards fall, and it's only a matter of time.
Yep. So let's go ahead and roll this one out. Where do I think gun control is going? I think what I've thought for basically 20 years. Yes, they are coming to take all of your guns, and if you say otherwise, your head is about that far inside your colon. Full stop. They're going to try, but there is no pretense of reasonable left. Andrew, where do you think gun control is going?
Yeah, confiscation, door to door. It's going to lead that way. We already have universal registration, so it's going to be the next step. Is I wouldn't be surprised if they try to push some kind of confiscation. So, but yeah, it's a matter of the people, and then that's when the people really need to start fighting back. Don't resist at all costs. Don't give in.
Yeah, and choose your friends wisely, because like COVID showed us, neighbors diming out neighbors is never out of the question. So, be loud, be an advocate, and watch your butt. Watch who you trust. Matter of Fact's podcast heading out the door. Bye, everybody.
Bye.